I invite you to join me in an attitude of prayer. Loving God, we come to you on this Pentecost morning, asking that you pour out your Spirit to our church once again, that you spark in each one of us the fire of Pentecost, that we may burn brightly for you. We ask that as we gather here, you open our ears to new ways of hearing, our hearts to new ways of understanding, our souls to new ways of yearning to you. I ask that the meditations of all of our hearts and the words of my lips, as always, be pleasing unto you. Amen. Now, I think that I have a contrary nature at times when it comes to how the word love seems to be so easily used, particularly in television and movie titles. We cheapen that word love. And if the word love is used, I'm almost predisposed to ambivalence or worse. I'll give you some examples. When it came to Everybody Loves Raymond, I didn't even really like him. And then there was The Love Boat. It was too silly. And it really was more about desire than love. And then there was Love American Style. It was unwatchable. Mostly because it was after my bedtime and my mother would not approve. But the one I think that will surprise you the most is that I am probably the only person on earth that doesn't like I Love Lucy. I know, it's controversial, but I've always struggled. I've always struggled with the way that Lucy and Ricky quarreled and fought. I didn't find Ricky all that funny. But given that, I decided to have a little bit more of an open mind, and I decided recently to set through 2 episodes, and I wanted to give it another chance, another attempt. And for the most part, I think I suffered silently through them. You'll have to ask the jury later on that one, though. But CBS had colorized both of the episodes and had placed them on prime time. Now, one of the episodes was intriguing to me, and it was for reasons of my own. It wasn't about Lucy at all. It was an episode in which they were celebrating the birthday of Lucy and Ricky's TV child, Little Ricky. In her over-the-top way, Lucy was going to make it her vision of the perfect birthday party. Her craziness was also fueled by a competition with another mother. They were having dueling parties on the same day. This made it an oncoming storm of crazy. Lucy's ultimate plan was to invite TV Superman George Reeves to come jumping through the room, as that was Little Ricky's favorite hero. Her hope that this would trump the puppet show and the pony rides and the clown were the hopes that she could ruin the other party. And then it appeared that her plan had fallen through. Now, she couldn't let everybody know that George Reeves wasn't going to be there, so in her madcap scrambling, she put on a fake costume, went out on the 3rd floor ledge of her apartment, and tried to jump in through a window. But as is always Lucy's way, she ended up in a raining downpour of water, pigeons at her feet, and a drain pipe falling around her. Stuck. And that was all meant to be played for laughs. But the episode really didn't completely redeem I Love Lucy for me. But it had some merits. And it left me with some questions. Why in our society, and why even in our faith tradition, are birthdays marked with such fanfare? Our biggest celebration of the year in church is Christmas. And it really is a birthday celebration. I understand the celebrating of great passages. I remember my 16th, my 21st, my 29th birthdays very clearly. But I do not recall my 5th birthday. And I am quite certain that Superman did not jump through a window for me. I really do understand marking the big birthdays, especially when they have great numbers like 80, 90, and 100. And we've celebrated those together here. But we really seem to love to mark all birthdays. Maybe it's the cake, the candles, the happy birthday song. We just love to sing happy birthday. So given that, why isn't Pentecost Sunday more like a birthday party. Pentecost, by all accounts, is the birthday of the Christian church. It is the moment of the coming of the Holy Spirit, and it ushers a new way of being a Christian community. Last week, we marked the ascension of Jesus. His ministry and the direct celebration of Easter were over. They had ended, and the apostles and disciples were trying now to find their way in the world. They stood ready for some spark. In the reading I shared from the second chapter of Acts, we hear the familiar tale of the coming of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost Day. The story is vivid for us. The images of the wind and the tongues of fire, they fill our minds. There is chaos and there is clarity of purpose. And it drives the disciples out into the streets as they proclaim the message of the church's true birthday. They no longer are just followers of Christ. They are now the church, and they are proclaiming the good news to the world. We love to tell and hear this story of our Christian tradition every Sunday this time of year. We love to mark the birthday, but we fail to stop and observe the special guest. We focus on little Ricky, and we forget to turn and say, hey, isn't that Superman? I think that's why I love that our birthday celebration today as a church was also attended by the words from the prophet Ezekiel. As I read and pondered our scriptures for this week, I remembered hearing the old spiritual as a kid. Dem bones, dem dry bones. Now hear the word of the Lord. I believe that we get this story to let us focus on the Holy Spirit. In the Hebrew scriptures, there is a word for the breath of God. It is ruach. The breath of God was breathed over the waters of the deep. It is the very breath that filled creation's lungs. It is also the same breath that brings life into the dead bones in Ezekiel. Ruach, the breath of God, becomes the word spirit in our scriptures. When we hear the prophetic stories that the Spirit of God was upon the prophet, we could just as easily say that God's breath filled the prophet. Ezekiel speaks with authority of spirit. We hear about the breath of spirit again among the dry, dead bones. I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. I will lay sinews on you, and you will cease. You cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. And you shall know that I am God. As I prophesied, suddenly there was a noise, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone, but there was no breath in them. And God said to Ezekiel, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, mortal, say to the breath, and thus says God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. And the breath came, and it came to them, and they lived. We are invited into this valley today of dry bones to share Ezekiel's vision. The faith tradition of the Hebrew people had been shaken by their scattered diaspora, their captivity in Babylonia. The once proud people of God were a dried out and scattered remnant of their once glory. Ezekiel sought to let them know that the Spirit of God, the very breath of God, could still revive them. We mark and celebrate Pentecost as the birth of the Christian church. But as we begin to look at the celebration, it really started in that upper room more as a wake. The gathered apostles and disciples had gathered together after the ascension, and they were trying to decide how to pull themselves together. But Jesus had made them a promise that the Spirit, the Comforter, the Advocate would come to them. This promise echoes the same strength and place of power of Ezekiel. O breath, breathe upon these slain, that they may live and breathe. And breath came into them, and they lived. The breath of God and the Holy Spirit is equally in dramatic fashion displayed in Acts 2. Suddenly from heaven there came a sound of the rush of violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared to them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them the ability. Today, we live as the descendants of this church, meant to be pouring out to the streets proclaiming the good news. But too many people of the world and our community will often view the church as a valley of dry bones. We continue to mark the birthday and forget to tap into the significance of our special guest. As a member church in the United Church of Christ, we keep hearing and proclaiming that God is still speaking. I love those words. They offer power and direction to us. I just wish that every once in a while we would stop and remember that beyond speaking, God is still breathing. And the breath of God is meant to flow out into the church and beyond. This is the heart of what we heard today in the lesson from Romans. Paul wanted us to know that God is still breathing on us and in us. Paul tells us, "For we do not know how to pray as we ought, but the very Spirit intercedes. The Spirit intercedes in us with sighs too deep for words." God's very breath is meant to escape from us in sighs too deep for words. While this is our birthday, what makes it a happy birthday is not the marking of another year, but remembering who attends our party. Who attends our party with sighs too deep for words. May the power of the Holy Spirit breathe on you, breathe through you. And on this, our birthday, let us pause and catch our breath.